Instructor Velmara pressed 3 of her 6 appendages against the observation deck's transparent aluminum barrier, watching the survival exercise planet below with growing concern. 30 days. 30 standard galactic days since she'd dropped 16 students from 12 different species onto that unforgiving rock. 15 distress beacons currently blinked on her console, their desperate signals screaming for immediate extraction. One beacon remained stubbornly silent. Instructor, her teaching assistant Cornix chittered nervously, his antennae twitching. Should we not retrieve the human? The regulations clearly state. I know what the regulations state. Velmara snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. Her third stomach churned with anxiety. 30 days without a distress call from a human. That was either very good or catastrophically bad. With humans, you never quite knew which until it was too late. The survival course was mandatory for all species seeking membership in the Galactic Federation. Simple premise, really. Drop students on a Class 3 survival planet with nothing but standard-issue emergency supplies. Wait for them to activate their rescue beacon. Grade them on how long they lasted before admitting defeat. Most species called for rescue within 6 hours. The proud Threxian warrior caste usually made it to day 2 before hunger and the planet's irritating acid rain broke their spirit. Her personal record was a Quellic meditation master who'd lasted 11 days through sheer stubbornness and the ability to enter a metabolic stasis. Humans, though. Humans were different. Run the bioscan again, Velmara ordered, her voice tight. Tell me Kaelen Marcus is still alive. Cornix's claws danced across the holographic interface. Biosigns are actually quite strong, Instructor. Heart rate steady. Body temperature normal. No signs of distress, injury, or malnutrition. He paused, his antennae drooping in confusion. That cannot be correct. Let me recalibrate. While Cornix fussed with the instruments, Velmara reviewed the other students' extraction reports. The Yanthil twins had called for rescue on day 1 after encountering a mildly venomous insect. The Drexen representative had managed 3 days before the lack of proper mineral supplements became unbearable. Even Jorlix, her star pupil from Andromeda sector, had activated his beacon on day 7 when a storm destroyed his shelter, all perfectly acceptable performances. All reasonable responses to hostile conditions, but that human, Instructor. Cornix's voice cracked with alarm. You need to see this. The satellite just completed its orbital pass over the human's landing zone. Velmara swooped over to the display, her cardiovascular system pumping faster. The high-resolution image loaded in sections, revealing the forest clearing where Kaelen Marcus had been deposited exactly 30 days ago. Her primary heart stopped. Her secondary heart forgot to compensate. By the 7 moons of Thresh, she whispered. Is that? Cornix leaned closer, his compound eyes widening. Is that a fence? It was indeed a fence. A proper fence, constructed from sharpened logs and woven vines, encircling an area roughly 50 meters in diameter. But that wasn't the concerning part. Inside the fence were neat rows of something that looked disturbingly like cultivated plants. Next to those were what appeared to be irrigation channels, feeding from a diverted stream. And near the center of this impossible construction stood a shelter that could no longer be called a shelter. It had a sloped roof, raised foundation, and what might have been a chimney. Zoom in on Sector 3 Alpha, Velmara commanded, her voice hollow, the image magnified. Cornix made a sound like a dying accordion. Are those animals, he asked. 3 creatures, native herbivores from the planet's eastern plains, grazed contentedly within a smaller fenced area. They wore crude halters. They looked domesticated. When did we add animal husbandry to the survival curriculum? Cornix's voice climbed 3 octaves. Because I definitely did not receive that curriculum update. Velmara couldn't speak. Her teaching career, spanning 47 years and over 2,000 students, had not prepared her for this. Survivors were supposed to find shelter, locate water, maybe catch some fish if they were clever. They were not supposed to establish agricultural operations. Run a timeline analysis, she finally managed. Show me what that human has been doing. The computer compiled satellite imagery from the past 30 days, creating a time-lapse video that made Velmara's organs rearrange themselves into stress. Day 1, Kaelen Marcus had done exactly what was expected. Built a basic shelter. Located water. Started a fire. Perfectly standard. Day 2, he'd improved the shelter. Also normal. Perhaps a bit elaborate, but humans did tend toward over-engineering. Day 3. That's when the madness began. Instead of focusing on survival, on rationing his supplies and preparing to signal for rescue like a sensible being, Kaelen Marcus had started digging. Long, straight trenches arranged in parallel lines. What was he thinking? Cornix breathed. By day 5, the human had planted seeds. Seeds. Harvested from local vegetation, apparently. The irrigation system appeared on day 7, an impressive feat of engineering using hollowed logs and gravity. The fence went up between days 10 and 14, each post sunk deep and reinforced with stones. He caught the herbivores on day 18, Cornix narrated, his voice distant with shock. Used a trap made from, is that a counterweight system? Where did he learn that? Humans have something they call the internet, Velmara muttered. Apparently, they spend significant time watching instructional videos about skills they'll likely never need. That seems inefficient. That seems terrifying. The time lapse continued. The garden grew. The animals multiplied. Somewhere around day 23, Kaelen Marcus had constructed what looked suspiciously like a smokehouse. On day 27, he'd added a second building that might have been a workshop. The current image showed a human settlement. Not a survival camp. A settlement. Instructor Velmara, Cornix said carefully. I believe we have a problem. You think? She gestured wildly at the screen with 4 appendages simultaneously. That human has been down there for 30 days and hasn't just survived, he's thrived. He's colonized. At this rate, by day 60 he'll have established a functioning economy and filed for planetary sovereignty. Should we extract him? Can we extract him? Look at that fence. He's built defenses. What if he doesn't want to leave? They stared at each other, the horrible possibility settling between them like a toxic gas. The regulations are clear, Cornix said slowly. We cannot extract a student without their explicit consent via distress beacon activation or until the maximum exercise duration of 60 days concludes. 30 more days? Velmara's voice scaled higher. In 30 more days, he'll have invented democracy and applied for Federation membership. Perhaps we should check on him? Cornix suggested. A wellness visit? We could send a probe. No. Velmara straightened her posture, forcing 3 of her hearts to calm down. We follow protocol. But we watch him. Constantly. I want real-time monitoring. If that human builds anything resembling a government building or a trade post, we intervene immediately. Understood, Instructor. Velmara turned back to the display, watching the tiny figure of Kaelen Marcus emerge from his shelter house farm complex. Even from orbit, she could see he moved with confidence, without the desperate edge that usually characterized survivors at this stage. He walked to his garden and began harvesting something, on day 30 of a survival exercise, harvesting crops. Humans, Velmara said to nobody in particular, are going to give me stress-induced molt. Cornix pulled up the human's file. His academic record indicates he studied xenobiology and cultural anthropology. His application essay mentioned an interest in learning sustainable practices from primitive civilizations. Primitive civilizations? Velmara's voice dripped with irony. That human has reverse-engineered 10,000 years of agricultural development in 30 days. Below, on the planet's surface, Kaelen Marcus appeared to be teaching one of his domesticated animals a trick. The creature responded, following a command. Alert the Federation Oversight Committee, Velmara said quietly. Tell them we need to revise the survival course parameters. On what grounds? She gestured at the screen. On the grounds that one species is fundamentally broken when it comes to basic survival instincts. Normal beings try to endure and escape. Humans apparently try to establish permanent residence and agricultural infrastructure. Day 32 arrived with Velmara questioning every career choice she'd ever made. The human situation had escalated from concerning to philosophically disturbing. Kaelen Marcus had not only refused to activate his distress beacon but had apparently forgotten such a device existed in his possession. Morning report, Instructor, Cornix announced, his antennae drooping with exhaustion. He'd been monitoring the human continuously for 48 hours. The subject has constructed a water wheel. Velmara's third eye twitched. A what? A water wheel. For mechanical power. He's using it to operate some kind of grinding mechanism. Cornix pulled up the footage. We believe he's processing grain. Grain. The word came out flat, emotionless. Velmara had moved beyond panic into a state of numb acceptance. Of course he's processing grain. Why wouldn't he be processing grain on day 32 of a basic survival exercise? The door chimed. Director Felix entered without waiting for acknowledgement, his crystalline form refracting the overhead lights in agitated patterns. As head of the Galactic Federation's Education and Training Division, he rarely made personal visits. His presence meant Velmara's carefully organized life was about to become significantly more complicated. Instructor Velmara, Felix's voice resonated through the observation deck. Explain to me why I received a priority alert about a human building a farm. Would you believe me if I said it's perfectly normal human behavior, Director? No. Then I have no explanation that will satisfy you. Felix moved to the observation window, studying the planet below. Show me. Cornix activated the live feed. The screen filled with an aerial view of Kaelen Marcus's settlement, now expanded to include several outbuildings, extensive gardens, a pen containing 6 domesticated herbivores, and what appeared to be the early stages of an orchard. How long has he been down there? Felix asked. 32 days. And his distress beacon? Unused. Possibly forgotten. Maybe repurposed into a garden decoration. We honestly don't know anymore. Felix was silent for a long moment, his internal structure pulsing with thought. Has he shown any signs of psychological distress? Mental breakdown? Reality detachment? That's the disturbing part, Velmara admitted. His biosigns indicate perfect health. Better than perfect, actually. His stress hormones are lower than when he started. He appears to be enjoying himself. Enjoying himself. Felix repeated the words as if testing a foreign language. During a survival exercise designed to push students to their physical and psychological limits, this human is enjoying himself? He whistles, Director. Cornix offered helpfully. While doing farm work. We've documented 17 different melodies. I see. Felix turned from the window. And the other students? Those who actually signaled for rescue like reasonable beings? All extracted safely. Most are recovering well from their ordeals, though several have filed formal complaints about the exercise's difficulty level. Velmara pulled up the reports. The Yanthil twins claim the planet was unnecessarily hostile. The Drexen representative is demanding a refund of his application fees. But the human built a farm. The human built a farm. Felix's form flickered with what might have been amusement. I need to see this creature for myself. Prepare a shuttle. We're going down there. Velmara's organs performed an elaborate dance of alarm. Director, the regulations strictly prohibit direct contact during active exercises. The regulations, Felix said calmly, were written under the assumption that students would behave in a predictable manner when faced with survival conditions. They did not account for students establishing agrarian societies. I'm invoking administrative override. Prepare the shuttle. 20 minutes later, Velmara found herself descending through the planet's atmosphere, her entire career flashing before her multiple eyes. Beside her, Cornix clutched his datapad like a security blanket, while Director Felix sat perfectly still, inscrutable as always. The shuttle landed in a clearing 200 meters from Kaelen Marcus's settlement. Velmara had deliberately chosen a spot outside the fence line, uncertain about the human's reaction to unexpected visitors. Territorial behavior was documented in human psychology files. So was something called defending one's property, which sounded alarmingly aggressive. Sensors indicate the human is in the eastern garden section, Cornix reported. He appears to be, is he singing? They exited the shuttle cautiously. The air smelled wrong. Not the usual scent of a survival planet's desperate struggle, but something else entirely. Something that made Velmara's sensory organs confused. Is that bread? She asked. According to my analysis, yes. Freshly baked bread. Cornix consulted his datapad. Also detecting herbs. Cultivated herbs. And something our database identifies as grilled meat with seasoning. He's cooking. Velmara stated. With seasoning. On a survival planet. This is my life now. They approached the fence line, and Velmara had to admit the construction was impressive. Sturdy posts, tightly woven barriers, even a gate with a functional latch. Through the gaps, she could see ordered rows of thriving plants, the water wheel turning steadily in the diverted stream, and smoke rising from the chimney of the main building. Hello, she called out, her translator rendering the word in standard human English. Kaelen Marcus? This is Instructor Velmara from the Galactic Survival Training Program. A figure emerged from behind one of the outbuildings, and Velmara got her first direct look at her problematic student. Kaelen Marcus was a human male of average height for his species, with sun-darkened skin and hair that had grown longer over the past month. He wore clothing that appeared to be modifications of his standard-issue survival gear, supplemented with what looked like animal hide. He carried a basket filled with vegetables. His expression upon seeing them was not fear, confusion, or even relief. It was mild annoyance, as if they'd interrupted something important. Oh, Kaelen said. You're early. Velmara blinked 3 eyes in succession. Early? For the 60-day mark. He set down the basket and approached the gate. The exercise runs 60 days standard, right? I've still got 28 days left. You know about the 60-day limit? Cornix stammered. Sure. Read the entire regulation manual during the flight to the planet. Seemed like important information. Kaelen unlatched the gate and swung it open. Since you're here anyway, want to come in? I just pulled fresh vegetables, and I've got stew cooking. Director Felix moved forward, his form shifting colors with interest. You've been down here for 32 days without signaling for rescue. Why would I signal for rescue? Kaelen looked genuinely puzzled. This is the best classroom I've ever had. Do you know how rare it is to find a planet with compatible soil chemistry, diverse plant species, and tameable wildlife all in one location? This place is a paradise for applied xenobiology research. It's a survival exercise, Velmara said weakly. Right, and I'm surviving. Thriving, actually. Kaelen gestured at his settlement with obvious pride. I've documented 43 edible plant species, successfully domesticated a local herbivore variant, developed a sustainable crop rotation system, and I'm this close to perfecting a fermentation process for the local tubers. My thesis committee is going to lose their minds over the data I'm collecting. Your thesis committee? Felix inquired. Oh yeah. I'm pursuing my doctorate in sustainable colonial practices. This exercise is basically free research time on a virgin ecosystem. Do you have any idea how expensive it would be to book lab time on an actual unsettled planet? Kaelen's enthusiasm was palpable. When I saw this survival course in the Federation enrollment requirements, I thought it would be a tedious box to check. Turns out it's the most valuable educational experience I've ever had. Velmara felt faint. You're treating this as a research opportunity? Well, yeah. What else would I do? Sit around eating ration bars and feeling sorry for myself? Kaelen shook his head. That would be a waste of perfectly good resources. Come on, seriously, you should see what I've built. The composting system alone is breakthrough stuff. They followed him through the gate in a daze. Up close, the settlement was even more impressive. Every structure showed careful planning and skilled execution. The gardens were immaculate, with different sections clearly labeled using carved wooden markers. The animal pen featured a covered shelter, feeding troughs, and what appeared to be enrichment activities for the creatures. This is the main house, Kaelen said, leading them to the largest structure. I know the regulations said minimal shelter, but I figured as long as I was using only materials found on-site, it wasn't technically cheating. The insulation system was tricky. Had to experiment with different plant fibers before I found one that worked. Inside, the shelter was warm, dry, and shockingly comfortable. Rough furniture, woven mats, storage containers filled with preserved food. A pot hung over the fire pit, emitting the smell that had confused Velmara's sensors earlier. That's the stew, Kaelen explained. Local greens, meat from a hunting trip last week, tubers that taste remarkably similar to earth potatoes. I've been experimenting with flavor combinations. The native herbs here are fascinating from a biochemical perspective. Felix examined a workbench covered in carefully organized samples, notes, and primitive tools. You've maintained research documentation throughout this exercise? Of course. That's the whole point. Kaelen retrieved a stack of bark sheets covered in detailed handwriting and sketches. Daily observations, experimental results, ecological assessments. I've even started mapping the local fauna migration patterns. There's a fascinating correlation between the seasonal water table fluctuations and herbivore breeding cycles. Velmara picked up one of the bark sheets, scanning the meticulous notes. The information was thorough, scientifically sound, and absolutely not what a survival student should have been focusing on. Kaelen Marcus, she said carefully. You do understand that the purpose of this exercise was to test your ability to endure hardship and recognize when to request assistance, correct? Sure, he agreed cheerfully. But I didn't experience much hardship. The climate here is mild, water is abundant, the soil is incredibly fertile. Honestly, this planet is better suited for colonization than half the established Federation worlds I've read about. He paused. Is that why you placed the exercise here? To test if students could recognize favorable conditions versus actual survival scenarios? The three instructors stared at him. That's not. Cornix began. We didn't. Velmara tried. Felix's form pulsed rapidly, which Velmara had learned indicated deep thought. Kaelen Marcus, answer honestly. If you had landed on a genuinely hostile planet, one with scarce resources, dangerous conditions, and legitimate survival challenges, would you have activated your distress beacon? Kaelen considered this seriously. Probably around day 5, maybe 6. If I determined the environment was incompatible with long-term sustainability and my continued presence posed unnecessary risk. He smiled. But this planet isn't hostile. It's a gift. I've still got 28 days of research time left, and I intend to use every minute of it. Director Felix made a sound that might have been laughter. Instructor Velmara, I believe we've just discovered a fundamental flaw in our evaluation system. What flaw? Velmara asked desperately. We've been testing survival instinct. But humans don't just survive. Felix gestured at the settlement surrounding them. They adapt. They improve. They build. We gave them a test designed to break their spirit, and instead we provided them with opportunity. Kaelen Marcus beamed. Exactly. You get it. Velmara looked at her career, her reputation, and her sanity crumbling around her. Then she looked at the thriving settlement, the documented research, and the genuinely happy humans standing before her. Cornix, she said tiredly. Make a note. Effective immediately, we're revising the human survival course requirements. To what? Cornix asked. She gestured at the farm, the gardens, the impossibly successful colonial operation that shouldn't exist. I have absolutely no idea. But clearly the current system isn't working. Kaelen Marcus offered them bowls of stew. It smelled delicious. Velmara accepted hers and took a bite. It tasted even better than it smelled. Outstanding, Director Felix declared. Truly outstanding. Velmara looked at the human who'd broken her carefully structured exercise, revolutionized her understanding of survival behavior, and somehow made her question decades of established educational practice. Then she took another bite of stew and admitted, silently, that maybe humans weren't broken at all. Maybe they were just fundamentally different in ways the galaxy was still learning to understand, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the Federation needed.